How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiaga. Today is Thursday, July 18th, and on today's show, regarding some more topics around the NFL, there's a wide variety of things I wanted to get to on today's episode, starting off with more on the Dallas Cowboys. Charles Haley, the longtime Dallas Cowboy from the 1990s, Hall of Famer, spoke on the Dallas Cowboys situation with Dak Prescott, going in on how to solve that issue with Dak and also talking about Jerry Jones. Then more on Hard Knocks, talking about this latest episode that dropped on Wednesday, the interaction between General Manager Joe Schoen and Saquon Barkley's agent that ultimately led with Saquon signing with the Philadelphia Eagles. And also, to continue on with the topic of the Eagles, we're going to look at what Darius Slay said about their defense in 2024, what he's most looking forward to, and giving his opinion on some of their new acquisitions that they got during this offseason, plus a couple more topics towards the end of the show. So make sure to stay tuned to that. And before I do get started, I wanted to remind you guys, if you have any questions or comments you want to make on today's show, please use the tip and donations link, GSMCPodcast.net. By using that link, your question or comment will pop up on my screen. I'll read it out loud and just carry the conversation maybe in a different direction with whatever you guys have to say. It's a massive help for the show and the network as well. So please, if you guys would use that with any comment or question, use the link, GSMCPodcast.net. But now we can jump into the first segment after that on the Dallas Cowboys. Some more opinions, some more suggestions that other people have given to how to resolve this issue right now, mainly around Dak and their contract situations, because that, to go along with the rest of their roster buildup and the lack of moves that they've made this year because of the contract situations, people are wanting to see things get done, and it is frustrating, especially for former players like Charles Haley, like I mentioned before, a Hall of Fame defensive end for the Dallas Cowboys, won 3 rings with the Cowboys during the 1990s, so he holds the Cowboys to a standard, right? A standard that has really not been there in terms of just results on the field for the Cowboys over the last, I guess, century at least, for the Dallas Cowboys. But more so on this situation with Dak, he appeared on the Up and Adams show, and he discussed a possible solution to get over this just issue with Dak so far. It's been pretty much a mess this offseason with not a lot being done, and Charles Haley brought up one point that I thought was interesting, as you guys see there. This is only one statement out of the 2 that he made that I thought were pretty interesting. He said, plain and simple, just trade Dak. Just put him up for the trade. Guess what? Every team in the league would be after him. Every team in the league. Dak is a winner. Dak is a great person, a great leader. I know him. That was Charles Haley talking about what do you do at this point with Dak Prescott. You know, nothing's being done so far. The negotiations are, according to Dak, they're going, they're talking. His camp is talking to the Dallas Cowboys, but you're getting to a point now in training camp where you want to see something get resolved, at least. I'm pretty sure most teams that are dealing with this, like the Dolphins or the Packers, feel the same way. But specifically with the Dallas Cowboys, with the spotlight always being on them, this year almost being painted as a lame duck year already for the entire team, but specifically also for Mike McCarthy and just this organization that has a lot of negative connotations around them heading into 2024. And Dak, obviously being the quarterback, plays a big part in how this season will end up for the Cowboys, and this could ultimately be the last year that he's there as their quarterback. And you'd want to get an extension done, but what does that mean for the other players that will need an extension down the line? And what does that mean for your cap space as well, because it's not in a good spot right now? Charles Haley, quite evidently, you could say that he's pretty fed up with it. He just wants to see this be resolved, and there is a problem with that, with his suggestion that I will get to in just a second. But with how everything has become so sloppy and how everything seems so discombobulated, Charles Haley looked no further than to Jerry Jones for how he has handled this entire situation, not just with Dak, but with also Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb also needs a contract extension at least at some point this year. And Charles Haley also had some quotes to make about Jerry Jones and just how he's handled the entire situation. When you guys see it on your screen. He said he kept backloading everything, so now he's screwed. His bill came due and he doesn't have the money to be able to pay everyone, and so he's going to have to find another way around the salary cap. He gambled a long time, and now time is up. And what Charles Haley's saying, pretty clear that Jerry, just not just Jerry Jones, but the entire organization, has not really handled this situation well. That's been clear. That's probably been the main message around the Cowboys all offseason, that all of their problems that they've just been putting off to the side have now just piled up on them. There's nowhere really to go right now for the Cowboys. So with that all being the case, to go back to Charles Haley's first statement that I wanted to address first, the one about trading Dak, that is an option. It is plausible. It's not like it's financially or contractually impossible. But with that being the case, you could trade Dak. But if you do trade Dak, what does that mean for this season, right? If you do trade Dak at some point during training camp or in a blockbuster, just shocking move before training camp starts next week for the Cowboys, you're almost just throwing this whole year away. Obviously, if you trade Dak, you're fully going in with Trey Lance, and like I mentioned, if it was already painted as a lame duck year, you're already pretty much announcing to everybody that you're going to be tanking this year, just based off of what we've seen from Trey Lance, which is hardly anything, and it's not his fault, just dealing with injuries and not really given an opportunity to afterwards. But with Dak, obviously you have the standard with Dak, and moving down to Trey Lance, it's not going to be the same thing. And then at that point, if you're going to throw the year away by trading Dak, you might as well just fire Mike McCarthy anyway, because you're really handicapping him and not giving him any sort of chance to prove himself on a contract year for him. I didn't think he was going to get extended when he did, or I didn't think he was going to keep his job when he did last offseason or last season after they lost to the Packers. But he has his one last year left, and ideally, in a great world, he would prove himself. He would, go out there, win maybe a playoff game or two, and he'd keep a contract. They extend him, but that hasn't been the vibe I've been getting from the Cowboys. It seems like they're just going to ride it out and then move on after this year. But if you trade Dak, you might as well just fire him at that point, because there's really no chance for him to stay, because you're taking away his quarterback. And all offseason that you've been participating with Dak, that's all just down the drain as well. So it isn't impossible, but you're just shredding everything that you've done up until this point. And then it's just time wasted as well. If you're going to trade him ultimately, then this whole offseason, when you could have traded him before, you've just been wasting time, because you still got to get to a contract extension with CeeDee Lamb. So on top of that, also, Dak has a no-trade clause on his contract. So if you do want to trade him somewhere, he has to get the final approval. He has to give his final approval to be traded, and then that becomes a whole nother situation if you guys don't agree on that. So yeah, it's possible, but it's probably the least likely thing that could happen right now. And then just moving on after that, with Dak and how this situation is just coming into fruition now, heading into camp, Dak has shown at least the good soldier, good student sort of attitude to just be present, still be there, showing that he truly wants to be a Dallas Cowboy, and he says the negotiations are ongoing, in comparison to CeeDee Lamb, who right now is the one next in line, because the Cowboys did state that Dak is the priority right now, so they're going to try and get an extension done with him first, based off of those comments. But if everything keeps moving at this pace, I think you got to ask yourself now, I've mentioned this before, whether or not I don't like using the word give up on Dak, just because he is a good quarterback. You don't give up on Dak technically, just based on who he is as a quarterback. But if it's really not coming to any sort of common ground, you're not finding any compromise, I think at this point, maybe start looking a little bit more, be a little bit more open to talking with CeeDee Lamb a little bit more in comparison to Dak. Maybe make CeeDee the priority right now, just based on based on all the signs you're getting right now. If nothing's moving on with Dak, you might as well try to kill two birds with one stone and try to at least communicate now more with CeeDee Lamb and get him to at least come close to an extension, more so than Dak at this point, because the money's obviously different, a larger range of cap space for quarterbacks, and Dak's probably going to get 50 to 55 million in that range. So it just doesn't work out for me. the main thing also, with CeeDee, he's the one holding out. Compared to Dak, Dak's showing up there, and you almost want to reward that with getting him that extension, but CeeDee's not showing up, and he's arguably your next most impactful player next to Dak. You can make an argument with him and Micah, but he just came off a ridiculous season, and you also want to reward him at the end of the day. But if you just keep pushing off the extension, it's not looking good for anybody at this point if you just keep holding out for the hope that you're going to extend Dak. But really, right now, I just feel like they got to bite the bullet on Dak a little bit. Just realize that this year, maybe it's already run its course, that this is going to be the last year, and then try to work something out with CeeDee Lamb, and then after, and if you do that, you have some room to work with before you have to get to Micah Parsons, and then you're only trying to get those two guys signed rather than Dak, because the fear with Dak, I know he's the quarterback, and he's only 31 or 30 years old right now, if my memory serves me right, but the biggest fear with Dak, and my biggest fear with paying guys, veteran quarterbacks, especially market price, the biggest fear with him is that his drop-off or his decline would come a lot sooner than you expect. And if you give him like a 3-year, 4-year deal or something like that, and his drop-off is just maybe next year at the earliest, then you've already invested so much money into him for his decline to probably come sooner, obviously, than CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons. That's my biggest fear. I think you're going a safer route by holding off on Dak for right now. I know it's hard because he is the quarterback, but focusing in on CeeDee and Micah. If you get those two done, because their decline, any sort of decrease in their performance isn't coming for another 7 to 8 years. You get those guys done because you're more safe with them, knowing that they're going to perform for the next almost decade. Then you come back to Dak, and if it works out, then it works out. If not, I think it's come to a point where the Cowboys and this marriage to Dak Prescott has run its course, and especially with Mike McCarthy, and this is the last point I'll make on it, going back to him, if this is going to be the last year of him as the Dallas Cowboys head coach, and you bring in a new head coach, usually that means that head coach wants to bring in a quarterback that fits his system. So Dak might not be that solution. It almost gives you another reason to just move on from Dak because it wouldn't work with another head coach. That's just my thinking on it. That's sort of what I'm reading off of the writing on the wall right now, because the Cowboys aren't showing me too much to contradict what I'm believing and what I'm seeing. So Charles Haley also seems to be at that point where he just wants it to be over and move on with it, rather than just postponing everything until the absolute last minute. But we're going to see. Everything should intensify more now with training camp starting for the Cowboys. I want to say less than a week from now. I want to say they start next Wednesday. So once that gets kicking into gear, I'm sure we're going to see more of these things get a little bit more advanced now that there is more pressure on all these teams to work these things out. But that'll do it for that segment. We're going to go into our first break, and when we return, we're going to talk about the last interaction between general manager Joe Schoen and Saquon Barkley's agent on episode 3 of Hard Knocks, dissecting what they said and really how close they came in comparison to what the Eagles gave Saquon Barkley from a contract standpoint, and whether or not Saquon just decided to move on because it was an easy out for him. That'll be the next segment. We'll be right back after this break.